What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Cinematic Reviews. As always, I'm your host, Chris, and this is the show about all things movies and TV. I got another awesome episode for you today. I'll be going over Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. This is his first film in his Batman trilogy. It's a trilogy that I've been super excited to review for you on the show, and I'm finally doing it after all these years of doing the podcasts. At the top of the episode, a quick reminder that you can watch the show every week at youtube.com/the cinematic reviews. You can also follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Follow, subscribe. It helps the show out a lot. It helps it grow, and I appreciate everyone that has been supporting the show all these years. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button or follow button on whichever podcast listening service you listen to. You can listen to it anywhere: Spotify, Amazon Music, as well as Apple Podcasts. Switching over, let's head over to news and reactions because we have a pretty big headline that just hit the wavelengths. So we got some pretty big Marvel-related news hit the headlines this past week. Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars has been pushed back. Avengers Doomsday will now release in theaters on December 2026, whereas before it was releasing in that May prior. And then Avengers Secret Wars will also be being pushed back to December of 2027, which also was slated to come out that May beforehand. My initial reaction to this was they're probably making room for Spider-Man. If you aren't aware, Tom Holland is currently filming Christopher Nolan's Odyssey film, as well as getting ready to film his fourth Spider-Man film in the MCU, Spider-Man Brand New Day, which is still slated to release in July of next year, which tells me that that Spider-Man film will lead into Doomsday as kind of a prequel, so to speak. So that's my take on it. I think Marvel has come out and stated that this is due to a story writing issue, which very well could be. I think they're still trying to clean up the mess that is phases 4 and 5 and 6. I guess we'll find out what exactly that story will be once those trailers and those behind the scenes photos start hitting. I got to imagine we're going to be seeing a lot of friendly faces, like Chris Evans has been rumored to come up. I think Mark Ruffalo is slated to come back. No word yet on if Scarlet Witch, who is played by Elizabeth Olsen, is coming back. I don't believe she will be returning to Marvel anytime soon, if at all. But I think this is strictly trying to get Spider-Man at the forefront of this movie. It was originally rumored and highly speculated that he would be solely doing voiceover work with a stunt double taking over. I think Marvel has now pivoted from that and just kind of shuffled up their calendar in order to work with Tom Holland's schedule and to get him as the main character in these next two films. It's really important that Spider-Man is the forefront of Secret Wars in particular, because if you're not familiar with that comic book run, he is basically at the center of it. That's where he gets the black Spider-Man suit. That's where he kind of leads the charge into that multiversal war that occurs during that comic book. So I think Tom Holland is going to be slated as the main character, followed by Anthony Mackie's Captain America. The Thunderbolts will be coming back. We of course have Robert Downey Jr. Returning to Marvel, but in this case, he is returning as the villain, as Victor Von Doom. So I'm thinking that they really want, and I'm hoping that they get quite a few scenes with Tom Holland and Robert Downey Jr. together, which would require Tom Holland to free up his schedule. So that is the main thing I think is going behind this new schedule shakeup with the Avengers films. They've also, I think, canceled a couple of Marvel projects that are going to be occurring in 2027 and 2028. Not exactly sure what's up with that. Maybe they're trying to rethink their strategy with these past couple of phases haven't been too great on their part. But I really do think that they're going to take advantage of having Tom Holland work with Sony and getting some contracts and agreements in order so that he can kind of be the leader of this next Avengers, similar to what Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. did in the first three phases of the Marvel universe. So that's the big Marvel headline that has come this way. Next, I'll be reacting to a couple of movie reactions. One is streaming on Max, which is Mickey 17. I can't remember exactly when this one came out. Let me check here. I think this was back in maybe February when this was released in the theaters, but it is now currently streaming on Max. So go ahead and check that out if you have a Max subscription. Let me pull up the info here. I believe it was March, but I am not 100% positive. Oh, it was March. March 7th of this year is when it came out. This stars Robert Pattinson as Mickey Barnes, aka Mickey 17 and Mickey 18. If you've seen the trailers for it, the main plot behind the story is 3D printing human beings, and accidentally Mickey ends up having what they call multiples in the film. So we have two Robert Pattinsons running around, which is really funny because about a month or so later, we get two Michael B. Jordans in the movie Sinners. So this is the year of doubles, I guess. I guess we'll see what else is in store for us. Maybe Tron down the road in November has a couple duplicates of Jared Leto, maybe, but this certainly is starting to be the year of the doubles. So some other notable cast members: Stephen Yen, who played Glenn in the Walking Dead series, as well as Mark in the Amazon Prime Invincible show. He plays Timo, who is kind of best friends to Mickey, kind of betrays him here or there. But I love seeing Stephen Yen, and he's great in here as well as kind of that douchebag best friend that's really only looking out for himself, even though he claims, he has his best friend at heart. But it was a really interesting movie. I really like how they kind of redid, the classic tale of cloning people. This time they kind of lean towards something that we're using currently now, which is 3D printers are pretty big. That's their kind of cloning machine, is this high tech 3D printer that they're able to replicate Mickey, who has signed up as what they call expendable. He is basically their test dummy to try out viruses and other bacteria on this planet that they're trying to establish as a new place for humans to live. He also kind of takes a pretty nasty hit with some flamethrowers and some aliens that he comes across. So he's really just kind of getting everything thrown at him, all in the name of science. But I really enjoyed this film. Really enjoy Robert Pattinson. I'm super excited to finally see his second Batman film, which has been constantly delayed with writing and all that. But I think this was a really good kind of out of the box movie for him. He's kind of leaning towards working with great directors and kind of doing these oddball films, something like this. But it was really great. I really enjoyed it. Highly recommend it. The other film that I finally saw in theaters, and that was The Accountant 2, which is a sequel to the Accountant film starring Ben Affleck. We also get to see John Bernthal return into here, as well as J.K. Simmons for a hot second. I really loved that first film, The Accountant. It was something really unique. I love how they incorporated, autism, which has been a pretty big spotlight shined on it the past few years. I have relatives that, have autism and kind of live with it. And I love Ben Affleck's portrayal of, I believe it's Christian Wolf, who is an autistic hitman slash accountant for, these big mobs and crime lords around the world. And then his brother, who's played by John Bernthal, which is Braxton. He's kind of on the opposite end there, where he basically wants to run chaos around the world, make money, kind of be a loner, whereas Christian is more of the go-getter. He makes money off of crime lords and all that, but at the end of the day, he's going to save some lives, which is kind of where the story of the sequel takes place, where they go and try to rescue this Mexican family. I think they were either Mexican or Venezuelan, or I can't exactly remember, but he goes down and rescues a bunch of kids from this kidnapping scheme, I guess you could say, and he kind of drags John Bernthal along with him to save all these kids. This was a pairing I didn't expect to absolutely love and want more of. We got a little bit of this in the first film. It was very Chris centric in that first film. He kind of Ben Affleck kind of bounced off of Anna Kendrick a lot, and we kind of got John Bernthal sprinkled in there a little bit. This second movie really puts John Bernthal and Ben Affleck at the forefront. I love their dynamic as brothers. I love their bickering as brothers. I love how John Bernthal kind of makes fun of him, but he also deep down inside you know that he loves his brother, and he's just kind of being that brotherly mean to him with his his autism and all that. And Chris, he makes a lot of jokes. He's very sarcastic, very knowledgeable, very skilled in his art. But I've really enjoyed this film. A lot of times with these sequels to movies that weren't really huge, um, they tend to not be so good. But I think this was a great way to do a sequel to a movie like this. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did a third one. I think they kind of set it up at the end where they could, carry on with this brother relationship. Maybe they start their own practice as hitmen. Maybe they kind of get um, sucked into whatever past of either one of the brothers' lives. But I think a third one would be fun. They can take this template of the second one and just kind of spread it out, spread the world out, just kind of like John Wick did. But this was a really awesome film, so check it out in theaters. Um, I'm sure it'll hit one of the streaming servers at some point. I would guess maybe Max or Netflix will end up picking this one up. But definitely go out into the theater and check this out because I had quite a fun watching this one. So that is all today's news and reactions. Let's head over to today's featured film, Batman Begins. So, like I said, today's featured film is Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. This was his first take on the Batman character, which will follow eventually The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises to cap out his trilogy. Um, this was a big movie that when it came out in 2005, let me check out the exact date. June 15, 2005 is when this was released in theaters. It made, let me look at the box office here. It had a $150 million budget, and it grossed about double, a little over double, $375 million worldwide, which is really good. Back in the early 2000s, superhero movies were really kicking off. We had Spider-Man, played by Tobey Maguire, going on. We had the X-Men. This was right before, Robert Downey Jr. was going to kick off the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Iron Man. This was the same year that we had the first Fantastic Four movie, kind of led by Chris Evans as Human Torch. So the superhero world was kind of uh, picking up some steam. We also had, the Eric Bana Hulk movie come out. Ben Affleck did his Daredevil take. But then this kind of Nolan's trilogy kind of shifted what superhero movies were and what they could have been. He went for a more grounded, more serious, and more dark take on the character. Before this, we had Michael Keaton's Batman, directed by Tim Burton. He did Batman back in 1989, and then that followed up with the sequel to Batman Returns. Then we kind of jump into the Schumacher phase of the Batman movie history with Val Kilmer, rest in peace to Val, with Batman Forever, and then following with Batman and Robin, starring George Clooney as Batman, who has been voted one of the worst Batman actors to the day. Kind of jumping into Batman rankings, but he will be at the very, very bottom of that Batman list for sure. He's even admitted himself that he was pretty bad at Batman. So, but after that, that's when we kind of take a little short break of Batman, and then we lead into Christopher Nolan's kind of Batman era with The Batman Begins in 2005, followed by The Dark Knight in 2008, and then The Dark Knight Rises in 2012 to cap off that trilogy. So, yeah, this Christopher Nolan was kind of making a name for himself at the time. He's one of my favorite directors. I'd say he's probably number two or number three on my my top directors list. Tarantino is still up there. Then it's probably a battle between Nolan and maybe I want to say Steven Spielberg. They're probably going to battle for that number two spot. But Nolan is great. He did. I want to say it was The Prestige before or after this one. Let me pull up his filmography. I'm a little hazy on the timeline of his films because he's done some pretty big hits. Um, I know Memento was one of those. I think this was right before um, he did The Prestige. I think The Prestige came out in 2007. I want to say. Let me find it here. So here we go. So he did do also. Yep, The Prestige came out a year after this. So leading into The Batman Begins, we had he only did two films. I thought it was way more than that, but I guess it was only two. Um, we have Following and we have Memento, uh, starring Guy Pearce, which was a great film. I think that one, Memento, is probably what got him the job. I think for Batman Begins, and then once he did Batman Begins, he did The Prestige, followed by The Dark Knight. Um, then he did Inception. Then The Dark Knight Rises after that. So I think The Dark Knight was what really put him on the map. This was a Batman Begins was a great kind of lead into what would be one of the greatest films of all time, The Dark Knight. But this you kind of don't get The Dark Knight without the Batman Begins. Um, I have never really been a big fan of the name. You get a really cool name like The Dark Knight. And then I know The Dark Knight Rises gets a lot of hate thrown on it. I really like it. Um, but I guess Batman Begins is a pretty decent title. This is the beginning of the Batman, uh, kind of an origin story, which we've gotten a lot. I think Michael Keaton was the biggest one when that one came out in '89. Seeing Bruce Wayne's parents die in that alley was pretty big for comic book fans back in the '80s. Of course, I wasn't born then, but I can only imagine how they felt seeing Thomas and Martha Wayne dying in that alley, jumping out of the comic book pages like it did. Now we kind of jump back into it with Nolan's take um, on that iconic scene in the Batman lore. And then kind of after this one, Zack Snyder kind of leaned away from it a little bit. We get another iteration of that iconic scene in Batman vs. Superman, which I think Snyder did a pretty cool job. I know he gets a lot of hate with all the slow mo that he does, but I think he did a great job. I really like this take on it though. Um, I love that it's not like too bloody, too gruesome. It's pretty quick. But what really gets me is that split-second moment between Bruce and Thomas Wayne, where after Thomas gets shot, Martha is already deceased at the time, and I'll talk about her a little later. She kind of gets sidelined in this movie. But Thomas kind of has this moment where he's looking up at Bruce. He's not really crying. He's not really scared. All he does is shake his head and he tells Bruce to not be afraid. Those are pretty cool, awesome final lines when you're about to die in front of your child. It really shows the character that is Thomas Wayne in this Batman universe. He's a very heartwarming guy, very loving father and husband. We get another great line from him where they're riding in the train to that theater where they see the opera. And Bruce is looking out to, Wayne Enterprises off at the side. And he goes, "Is that where you work?" And Thomas has this line where he shakes his head again and goes, "No, I work at the hospital. I leave that to better men." And Bruce is kind of like, "Better men?" And he goes, "Well, more interested men." Really showing that Thomas Wayne inherited this company and started this company to help people, but his main focus is still helping people in the hospital as a doctor, hands on, boots on the ground, where he'd rather not be a suit in an ivory tower, making money for a bunch of billionaires. He'd rather sink his money into helping out Gotham and showing what a decent guy he is, and that even if he has money, he can still kind of go into the slums of Gotham and help them out. And there's a really awesome uh, way to introduce Thomas Wayne, and he kind of is the theme throughout this entire movie, where Bruce is trying to become the man that he wants to be, but also be the man that his father would be proud of, and then we get a little bit of it in The Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, but this one, Batman Begins in particular, is a very Thomas Wayne centric film. Um, Later on in the trilogy, we start getting into the main focus, which is, does Gotham need Batman anymore? When is it time for Bruce to hang it up? But this film is getting him started, really trying to figure out who he is as Batman. What does Batman stand for? And it all goes back to Thomas Wayne in that moment in the alleyway where he watches his father die right before him. And that's kind of where he gets his strength, his anger. He even says it to Ra's al Ghul, played by Liam Neeson, where he goes, "My anger outweighs my guilt," which is another great line, where he's so angry that he no longer feels guilty about his father's death or his parents' death, because, as you saw in that scene, he's the one that wants to go out in the alleyway, and he feels that guilt of it's his fault. But as he gets older, he starts to realize that his anger really, really does outweigh the guilt that he feels. So that kind of spawns his character Batman to channel his rage on the criminals of Gotham and to free the citizens of Gotham from all this crime and chaos. So really awesome themes in this movie. Love the quotes. I'll get to those quotes a little bit later because there's so many good ones. But to kind of recap what this movie is, Bruce Wayne is a billionaire playboy philanthropist who inherits his parents' company, or his father's company, I should say, after their untimely death. This sees him travel around the world trying to figure out who he is. He eventually comes across Liam Neeson's character, Ra's al Ghul, who is actually Henry Ducard, but he's really Ra's al Ghul. I have a little bit of issues with that, but I will talk about in a minute there. He meets Ducard. He eventually kind of gets trained in combat, jujitsu, karate, all that stuff, where eventually he comes back to Gotham, creates this persona of the Batman to fight crime and stop mob bosses. He eventually runs into the Scarecrow, played by Dr. Jonathan Crane. Cillian Murphy is fantastic. I'm going to talk about him a little bit too, as well as in The Dark Knight, because he pops up in there. But so that's kind of the main focus of here is Bruce Wayne stopping Ra's al Ghul from destroying Gotham, who ends up recruiting Scarecrow in here. So this is kind of the theme of this trilogy. You're going to get a couple of big Batman villains. This one we get Scarecrow and Ra's al Ghul. The Dark Knight, we have the Joker, as well as who was the other one? I'm drawing a blank now. Two-Face, Harvey Dent, and then Dark Knight Rises, we get Catwoman, Bane, and then a couple of other villains that pop up from the past. So, kind of jumping over to the cast and breaking down that, I love this cast. Christian Bale plays Bruce Wayne / Batman in this trilogy. I have a note on here that says the Batman voice, thumbs down, Batman suit, thumbs up. You're going to be hearing this a lot from me on the next couple episodes about Nolan's Batman. I do not like the voice. I never liked it when it came out. Still don't like it today, rewatching it for the show today. It's just really obnoxious. It's really unnecessary. And especially after watching what Ben Affleck did with the voice changer, I really wish, they would have used something like that instead of forcing Christian Bale to basically destroy his vocal cords, coming up with this Batman voice. I know the thought process behind it. It's supposed to, put terror in the criminal's eyes, supposed to scare people, intimidate them, whatever. it just doesn't work. It's just annoying. It's egregious. It's very unnecessary. Just throw a voice changer on him. Easy as that. Um, Other than that, I really like his Bruce Wayne. When I get to the Bruce Wayne rankings, he's going to be pretty high on the list. I really love what Christian Bale does with Bruce Wayne in this one, and then when he gets into the Dark Knight, I really, really like his Bruce Wayne in there. Um, but yeah, he was fantastic in this trilogy overall. Aside from that egregious voice, I really like the Batman suit. In this one. I'll talk about the other two suits on the next episodes of Christopher Nolan's Batman, but kind of focusing mainly on this suit in here. Um, the cowl was pretty cool. It was very reminiscent of Michael Keaton's Batman suit with a little bit of different tweaks. He doesn't have the yellow on his logo. It's just the straight black logo that Nolan kind of came up with. The entire suit is black so that he can blend into the dark. Um, I love those scenes with him and Lucius Fox, played by Morgan Freeman, where he's coming in and out of Bruce Wayne Enterprises with I'm going spelunking or I'm going parachuting, trying to make it seem like he's this adventurous guy, but he's really building a super suit for his superhero days. And I love it when Morgan Freeman just finally calls his bluff and goes, "Hey, I know you're not spelunking. I know you're not parachuting. I'm an old man. Don't bullshit me. The way I see it, this is all yours," is the famous line that he says. But I love it. I love the suit. Um, Kind of that military Kevlar armor that Morgan Freeman kind of explains to him how it'll stop a knife. Um, Not really a straight shot can get through it, but we've seen this. I think the Dark Knight more shows you what the suit is capable of. He's getting shot at, dogs are biting him, stuff like that. But I do like the suit, especially the cape. I love how the cape is like this fabric that as he glides through, the sky in Gotham, it kind of forms a shape and allows him to kind of glide through the town. No one really focused on like the science stuff of his suit, and that was really, really cool. Where we have that montage of Lucius Fox explaining the science behind all these um, different pieces of his suit. And then we eventually get to the tumbler, which is really, really awesome. I know it's this bulky, awkward, weird looking tank. It doesn't really look like the classic Batmobile, but I think that's why it's really cool because it's kind of out of the box that Nolan is. In the real world, we wouldn't be driving this sleek little, you know, hot rod looking car. We're going to find this big ass tank and we're going to take down criminals. We're going to intimidate criminals with a big ass black tank. That's really what we're going to be doing in the real world. And I know at the end of the day, this is a Batman movie. It's supposed to be ridiculous and outrageous, but I appreciate Nolan designing, the bat suit, the bat equipment, like the batarangs and the grapple and stuff, as well as the tumbler, being as grounded as possible in this world and making it seem like anybody with money or anybody with strings in our world could actually become Batman. All it takes is a few, maybe $1 billion to become Batman. So really, really awesome suit, really awesome Batmobile. Jumping over to the bad guys of the film, the main one is Liam Neeson, who I absolutely love. Before this, he was famous for playing Qui-Gon Jinn in the Star Wars franchise. Eventually goes on to make the Taken trilogy. But he's really great as Henry Ducard, who is kind of his Bruce Wayne's martial arts trainer when he goes into hiding. But in reality, he is Ra's al Ghul, even though they set up, what was it? Ken Watanabe, I think is his name. Let me pull it up. Yep, Ken Watanabe is technically, Ra's al Ghul, but I always consider Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul because eventually in Dark Knight Rises, he reveals to himself that he really is Ra's al Ghul behind the scenes. Kind of like The Mandalorian, where it was really Guy Pearce in Iron Man 3. So, excuse me. Moving on, we have Sergeant Jim Gordon here. He is not commissioner yet. I really like that. I really like that kind of touch to it, where throughout this trilogy, we go through kind of how Jim Gordon evolves. He starts as sergeant. Then at the end of this movie, he's like, nope, I'm a lieutenant now. And then when we get to the Dark Knight, he eventually becomes commissioner after a bunch of chaos ensues on Gotham, and I'll talk a lot about that uh, on the Dark Knight episode. But I really like the evolution of the character that we get through James Gordon. He becomes a really big spotlight in The Dark Knight Rises with him kind of dealing with the aftermath of The Dark Knight and what happened with Two Face. But this is a really fun start for him. Um, I thought it was really cool that he was the one to comfort Bruce Wayne when his parents died, and then that kind of leads back into the ending of The Dark Knight Rises. So I love this bond that Batman, Bruce Wayne, and Gordon have. It was really, really strong in here. Um, Almost as strong as Alfred, played by Michael Caine, who I absolutely love as Alfred. Um, Michael Caine is a fantastic actor, huge friend to Christopher Nolan. He played in Inception, he was in Tenet, and then of course these three Batman films. He is one of my favorite Alfreds. Um, on the Dark Knight episode, I will be ranking the Alfreds, and I think he is going to be battling um, Jeremy Irons for Alfred because I really love the Affleck Irons relationship in the Snyder universe, but I really love what Michael Caine does in here. He is essentially a really good father figure to Christopher Bale's Batman. Um, I love the lines in there. He has a line in there where he says, why do we fall, Master Bruce, so we can learn to pick ourselves up," which he kind of stole from Thomas Wayne. It's almost as if like Thomas is like reborn into Alfred almost. Alfred served the Waynes for so many years that he's basically a clone of Thomas, and I thought that was a really cool way to kind of keep the spirit of Thomas Wayne alive in Bruce's life. But I absolutely love Michael Caine in here. Um, he's fantastic in The Dark Knight, and I'm going to talk about him quite a bit in there because I love what Michael Caine does in The Dark Knight. But this one we can't really get what he does in The Dark Knight without setting the Alfred character up in Batman Begins, and I love what he did to it. It's so heartwarming. He's so genuine. Um, I love the acting. I love the realness of the character. I feel like Michael Caine put some of his own experiences in the Alfred character. It just felt so real and so wholesome with his conversations with Bruce and how much he cares for Bruce as a son. Fantastic job by Michael Caine. Absolutely love him. I mentioned him already. Morgan Freeman plays Lucius Fox, who is essentially the weapons expert for Batman. He eventually takes over as kind of the boots on the ground for Wayne Enterprises while Bruce kind of does his Batman thing and his philanthropy type of thing. Morgan Freeman eventually kind of crawls up the ranks and kind of takes a lot of the load off of Bruce and runs, Wayne Enterprises. So absolutely love Morgan Freeman in here. Um, Love his enthusiasm. Love his relationship that he builds with Bruce. Very smart guy in here where he created this entire arsenal of weaponry and science experiments because he's the one that creates the antidote for the scarecrow toxin in a matter of, I don't know, hours. And I love his little joke where he's explaining what exactly he did to create the antidote. And Bruce Wayne is like, "Am I supposed to understand it?" And he goes, "No, I just wanted you to know how difficult it was." Love Morgan Freeman in here. You can tell that him and Alfred have a past together because Alfred kind of looks at him and the way Michael Caine says Lucius when he leaves the room in that one scene, she tells me that they have a history together, and I wish they would have kind of built on that more. But they really only get like this one interaction together in the entire trilogy. So really love Margaret Freeman though. Rachel Dawes, played by Katie Holmes. This is the love interest of Bruce Wayne in this trilogy. Not a huge Katie Holmes fan, but I think she was pretty good in here. I'll talk about it more in the Dark Knight episode. I know I keep saying that throughout this episode, but the Dark Knight's going to be a big episode for this show. I have a lot of thoughts, a lot of feelings and reactions to The Dark Knight, with it being my number three favorite film of all time. Um, and the reason why I say specifically Rachel Dawes is because if you don't know, she ends up getting recasted by Maggie Gyllenhaal in The Dark Knight. And I'm going to spoil it a little bit here. I think I like Katie Holmes better in The Batman Begins. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I think her chemistry with Christian Bale's Bruce is a little bit more believable, a little more genuine than I think Megan Gyllenhaal did. Nothing against Megan Gyllenhaal. I love her. I think she was great as Rachel. I just think their relationship wasn't as believable and as wholesome as Bruce's and Katie Holmes was. And I've said this before on the show. I hate recasting. This is one of the most egregious recastings that I've seen. I wish they would have just retained Katie Holmes. I never did bother to research why she was recasted. I think I read somewhere at some point it was due to a scheduling conflict, and I think I'm gonna put that to bed right now on the show today. So I'm going to look up why Katie Holmes was recasted in Batman Begins, and we're gonna see what pulls up here. Katie Holmes was replaced by Megan Gyllenhaal as Rachel Dawes in The Dark Knight because she chose to pursue other acting opportunities. Specifically, she committed to another film called Mad Money. In an interview she gave to the Business Center, which ultimately bombed at the office, she stated that her decision was right for her at the moment. Yeah, I'm sorry to say, Katie, I think that was wrong. You should have stuck with The Dark Knight because I think you would have been awesome in there. Um, but yeah, I actually I like Katie Holmes in here. I'm not a huge fan of hers, but I do like her as Rachel Dawes in here, and it's a shame she couldn't continue on to The Dark Knight. But that was her decision, like she said in that interview. And then I mean that's history. So I'll talk about Rachel Dawes more in the Dark Knight episode because I have a lot of thoughts on Maggie Gyllenhaal's performance. But love Katie Holmes in here. The last character I wanted to bring up, that is the other main villain of the story, um, and that is Dr. Jonathan Crane, aka Scarecrow, played by Cillian Murphy, who is a fantastic actor. I love seeing him in things. He was in Dunkirk. He won an Oscar for Oppenheimer. But before all that, he was Nolan's Scarecrow. I think he did a great job. Um, the only issue I had with the Scarecrow character was kind of how he kind of disappeared towards the end. And that's kind of the one of the small issues that I have with Nolan is he kind of the writing isn't all there. Some of it's kind of convoluted, kind of messy. Um, I think he kind of backed himself into the corner with making Ra's al Ghul the main villain. But then it's almost as if like um, we spent so much time on the Scarecrow character. He goes, "Oh, I forgot. We still have Ra's al Ghul coming back, so we have to quickly get away with Scarecrow and make Liam Neeson the forefront of it." So they kind of just wipe him away by Rachel Dawes zapping him with a taser in the face, and that's it. We don't see him until the Dark Knight film. But I like Cillian Murphy's portrayal. I like the mask design for Scarecrow. I love the CGI effects. The one scene I remember as a kid was when he does it to Bruce, and we get the bat coming out of Scarecrow's mouth. That was pretty wild. And then Batman will spray Scarecrow with his own uh, medicine, I guess you could say, and he's got the tar face coming out of him. It was really cool effects with the Scarecrow poison. Uh, Cillian Murphy was pretty awesome, other than the fact that they kind of tossed him to the side real quick once they realized that Ra's al Ghul is coming back and we have to have the final showdown between him and Bruce. So I wish we would have gotten more Scarecrow. Um, he probably could have just been the main villain of the story. I don't think we really need Ra's al Ghul. They could have maybe saved Ra's al Ghul for the third movie if they really wanted to. But hey, this is what we got. Nolan did his best to kind of put these two together. I think story wise, it made sense. Ra's al Ghul kind of recruits Dr. Crane to make this fear toxin through the flowers, the blue flower that we see at the beginning of the film. So it was cool how Nolan was able to kind of tie the two characters in. It made sense on paper. I just think the execution was a little bit sloppy, a little lazy, with just throwing him aside by getting tasered in the face. I was like, come on, this is Scarecrow. Let's try a little better here. So that's all I got to say from it. But Cillian Murphy was great. Love him. Uh, Hans Zimmer's score. I talked about him a lot in the Gladiator episode. My favorite composer of all time, and it's because of this Batman trilogy. Um, the the theme that he wrote for Batman and Nolan's trilogy is just cinematic perfection. I love the score in these three movies, particularly again The Dark Knight, which I keep bringing up. Um, but in this movie, it kind of sets that up to what the vibe is going to be like music wise in this trilogy, and it's just perfection. Hans Zimmer, this is the best I think he's ever going to do. I love what he did with the score. It's just really fantastic. I have the vinyl disc for The Dark Knight Rises and The Dark Knight. I'm still tracking down the Batman Begins vinyl score for this, but I can't wait to just listen to this for hours. It's beautiful music. I love his composition for this movie. Perfect score. Um, Set pieces were great. I love the vibe of Gotham in here. I believe they filmed it in Chicago. It has very big Chicago vibes to it. Um, Whereas like Michael Keaton's Batman, the Schumacher Batman, they were like cardboard plastic sets. I know that was back in the 80s and 90s, but seeing the scenery shots of quote unquote Gotham, aka Chicago, I think is what it's supposed to represent. Were beautiful set pieces. Um, I love the kind of the narrows is what they call them. It's like the ghetto part of Gotham. Really cool. And then you get the business side of it, which is very elegant and extravagant, skyscrapers and all that. I love the train running through the entire city. Yeah, it was just great scenery, great set pieces for sure. Love it. Costumes I already talked about. I love the Batman suit in here. I love the ninja suits that the League of Shadows wears with Ra's al Ghul. Um, I really love everybody's outfit. Jim Gordon's outfit looks pretty comic accurate. Alfred's pretty, dressed up to impress. Really awesome costumes. And then the action and fight choreography, really awesome. I love the martial arts in here. I love the scene where Bruce is training with Ducard in the mountains, where he's learning, jujitsu, kung fu, karate, all that stuff. It's really cool. And then when he gets into the Batman costume, it looks like sometimes he has a tough time moving around, but I think he does pretty well with the suit. He'll get later on in the trilogy, particularly the Dark Knight Rises, he starts to get a little more flexible, a little more hand to hand combat. But I really like the action in here. Love the choreography that they came up with the League of Shadows and that kind of form of art with the jujitsu and stuff. So really awesome stuff. I'm gonna pull up my favorite quotes before we get into the rankings. Let me grab those. I have them somewhere here. I don't think I can find them. Where are they? I have them here somewhere. Here we go. Here we go. All right. So I think I have about 8 or 10 quotes on here. I try to cut it down. I'm gonna have a hard time on the next 2 episodes because there's a lot of quotes I love in The Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, but these ones are really good. These are the ones that kind of stand out to me the most when I think of and talk about Batman Begins. The first one here, this is the scene at towards the beginning of the film where he's in that prison camp, um, where he's fighting with those other inmates and they drag him off. Uh, the guy comes up to him and goes, I am the devil, or something like that. But then Bruce responds, you're not the devil, you're practice. I think that was a really badass line for him to say, where he's not taking any crap from anybody. He's seeing this prison as his training ground. He's practicing his martial arts that he uh, is trying to learn or teach himself, and then eventually, Descartes recruits him and really trains him in jujitsu. But that was a really badass line, so I had to put that in there. Then we have the very iconic line from this film: "Why do we fall, Bruce? So we can learn to pick ourselves up again." Um, Basically, like, let's get back on the horse. Kind of Nolan's take on that very iconic phrase. Never give up, and which Alfred really emphasizes throughout not just this movie but this entire trilogy, where he will never give up on Bruce. He even has that line where Bruce is like, "You'll never give up on me, Alfred," and he goes, "Never," in that lovely British accent of his. So great line from Alfred and Thomas Wayne. Your system is broken. I put that one in there. This is when Bruce is talking to Rachel about the whole Joe Chill carrying his parents, how the trial went out, and how, justice isn't really justice. He believes in punishing criminals physically instead of just, putting them in jail or making deals with lower scum to get the big fish. And I just really love that sign of how the system is broken. And not to get too political on this show, but it kind of relates to reality, how some of these systems we have in place are actually broken. And sometimes you kind of have to take matters into your own hands, which is what Bruce does with the kind of, how you say, iconic figure that is Batman, this symbol, if you will. Then we have another great line from Bruce: "Does it come in black?" And then I love how this is followed up in The Dark Knight Rises, where Morgan Freeman is like, "And yes, it does come in black." Very iconic line. I think I remember that one being in the trailer where they first kind of showed what the tumbler was, and we have him kind of like touching the buttons, and he's kind of feeling the steering wheel, and he's like, "Does it come in black?" with a big smirk on his face. Really great line. We get the iconic "I'm Batman," of course, which was made famous by Michael Keaton and his Batman. We get Christian Bale's take on this, where he's pulling, I think it's Falcone out of the. It's either Maroni or Falcone. I always get those two mixed up. I need to look up that now. Because I know Falcone and. Oh, it is Falcone. Maroni comes in later, but when he pulls him out of the car because he's going, "Oh, who are you? Who are you?" Pulls him out of the car and he goes, "I'm Batman." Really great line. "It's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me." Another great line by Bruce when he's in the Batman. Says this to Rachel, and this is kind of how she figures out that it is Bruce, because she is the one that told him that. "You never learn to mind your surroundings." This is a big line from Liam Neeson's Ra's al Ghul, where he is kind of mocking Bruce for never, watching his surroundings. He's more focused on what's in front of him instead of using his environment to his benefit, which he finally does. He finally learns his lesson at the end of the film with crashing the train with Ducard trapped in there. So, "I never said thank you." This is from Gordon, and then Batman responds, "And you'll never will, or you'll never have to." Great line. Another one from Bruce: "Bats frighten me. It's time my enemies shared my dread." This is the response to what Alfred asks, "Why bats, Master Wayne?" And this is his response there. And then I put this one in because it always makes me chuckle. So when Bruce, pulls up to the hotel or restaurant or whatever it is for dinner, he pulls up and the valet is like, "Ooh, nice car." And then Bruce responds, "You see my other one?" Hinting at the tumbler. I always get a chuckle at that line, so I put that one in there. So I'm going to post those quotes on social media so you can all see my favorite quotes from this film. I'll do the same thing for The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises as well. But yeah, I really love Batman Begins. Fantastic way to start off this excellent Batman trilogy from Christopher Nolan. Yeah, let's get to a couple of rankings to wrap up today's show. Okay, for today's Batman episode, I'm going to be ranking the Batman and the Bruce Wayne actors in order. First, we're going to do Bruce Wayne. At number one, I have Ben Affleck. I think he is the best Bruce Wayne that we've had. It was a very tight race with Christian Bale, who takes number two. But I just really like what Ben Affleck does as Batman. Um, I talked about him a lot on my review of Zack Snyder's Justice League film, along with Batman versus Superman. Yeah, I just really love what Ben Affleck did with the character. It's a real shame on what it kind of transpired into, where he was basically left for dead in the Flash movie. And kind of, I remember when he was first cast as Batman slash Bruce Wayne, um, the internet was set on fire. I know myself, I was a little hesitant on it. Um, but when Batman v Superman came out, he blew the character out of the water. He made him very comic accurate, I think. Ben Affleck himself is a huge Batman fan. He loves comic books. So I think he was probably one of the best actors to portray the character. So yeah, that's why he is my number one. Number two, Christian Bale. Like I said, I really love his Bruce Wayne. He very looks the part, acts the part. I love his ideology that he brings to the table. Very solid as Bruce Wayne, and really enjoy it. Number three, I've got Val Kilmer. This surprised me because for the longest time, I would have put Michael Keaton here at number three, but I recently watched Batman Forever in honoring Val Kilmer's passing. And I really like him as Bruce Wayne. He looked the part. I loved his mannerisms. I love his ideology with the character. Um, he was a really good Bruce Wayne, and it's a shame that he didn't return for Batman and Robin to not only grow the character but save us from the terrible performance by George Clooney. Um, but I really like Val Kilmer, and it's a shame that he only has the one movie to remember him. I think he could have did it really well job in expanding it and evolving the character if he was giving another chance at it. So it's a shame of what could have been, but I will always hold Batman Forever close to my heart. He was great as both Batman, but I really and Bruce Wayne, but I really like his Bruce Wayne for sure. Number four, this is where I put Michael Keaton. Love Michael Keaton. I wasn't alive then, but I've read stories and I've heard from other uh, movie fans that it was very similar to when Ben Affleck was casting. A lot of people were annihilating the casting of Michael Keaton. He was coming off the lovable movie Mr. Mom, and people just totally torched the idea of Michael Keaton being Bruce Wayne, let alone Batman. Um, but then he became people's favorite. I think my dad and I have this conversation all the time on who we think was the best Batman, who's our favorite Batman actor. My dad really liked Michael Keaton's. I know he's a fan of Bale's, but dads of my dad's generation, they really liked Michael Keaton and what he did with Tim Burton's film. So I put him at number four because I really enjoy him. Number five, another one that surprised me. This was Adam West. I used to watch the series on TV Land with Burt Ward and Adam West. Really liked his Bruce Wayne. I loved how he looked, loved how he talked, how he acted. Loved the voice. He was really cool. I loved watching him every week on the Batman series on TV Land. Number six, Robert Pattinson. Now this was tough because even though like George Clooney really belongs at number seven on the list, I really don't care for Robert Pattinson's Bruce. He really went a different route, and this is no offense to Robert Pattinson himself. I think he's a tremendous actor. I love what he did with the Batman part of the film, but I just really didn't like his take on Bruce. He was very emo, very depressing. Um, really leaned into the gothic vibe of it, and I just wasn't for me. I think it could have been better. I think he probably could have went a different route, but hey, that was his portrayal. That's what Matt Reeves was going for. But I just didn't really vibe with that one. And like I keep saying, number seven, George Clooney, where he belongs. Terrible Batman, terrible Bruce Wayne. I don't think I really have to go further on that, if you see him Batman and Robin, you know why he is at the bottom of every ranking list. So that is my Bruce Wayne list. Let's switch over to Batman. Again, number one, Ben Affleck. Um, really loved his Batman. Loved the voice modulator. That really did it for me. I loved his suits in the few movies that he was in, particularly the armored suit that he wears in Batman v Superman, which was straight out of the Batman Returns comic. I just really loved his Batman, how he acted, his ideology, the weaponry. It was really, really cool. It's a shame that we didn't get a Batman solo film starring Ben Affleck. It would have been perfect. Number two, Robert Pattinson. Really love his Batman. Uh, love the car, love the suit, love the fighting, uh, love the voice that he does in there. Really, really good Batman. I'm really surprised that he ended up number two on here. For the longest time, I would have said Michael Keaton, but I really, really like Robert Pattinson. So, as shocked as you may be, he is my number two, even though that movie gets a lot of hate. Number three, this is where Michael Keaton slates in. Very iconic suit. I love the little bit of fighting that Batman does in those films. I know back in the 80s and the early 90s, you know, there wasn't a whole lot to do in that suit that he was in. But I really like the look of it and how Michael Keaton acted in it. It was really cool. Number four, this is where I put Bale. Even though the voice is very egregious, I wanted to put him lower. I just couldn't. Um, because I like the suits, I like the weaponry that he does, I like the fact that he learned jujitsu and all that in Batman Begins, and then it carries into The Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises. I really do like his Batman. It's just the voice. I can't get past the voice, and I'm going to talk about it a lot during these Dark Knight episodes. So he's at number four. Number five, this is Val Kilmer. I like him as Batman. Not great. The reason why he's number five, and you could probably guess where I'm going with this, it's the suit. It's the nipples. It's the big crotch plate. Just a terrible suit. I don't know why they would make Val Kilmer suffer through this. And I haven't really mentioned this, and maybe I'll rank the Robins in a different episode. But Chris O'Donnell's costume is really egregious in there. You think Batman's got a big, private plate? Robin's is egregiously big, and it's very noticeable on the posters. Me as an adult, I can see it now. As a kid, didn't really pay attention to it. But me being a 30-year-old, now it's like, yeah, that suit's not for kids. And they did the same thing with George Clooney's suit. It's just, I can't get past the nipples or the crotch spot. It's just really bad. Val Kilmer as Batman was cool. I can't rank him over Christian Bale because of that suit. It's just, I'm sorry, I can't do it. 6, Adam West. He was okay as Batman. I loved his Bruce Wayne more. The costume, very ripped out of the comic. It was just a fabric looking thing. It wasn't really much to it. They're pajamas. It was an easy costume because he was basically wearing a Halloween costume. Same thing with Burr Ward. But I mean, he was all right as Batman. Mainly watched the show because of his Bruce Wayne and the voice, but nonetheless. And then at 7, surprise, surprise, George Clooney. Like, similar to what Val Kilmer did, just hated the suit. The Arctic suits in there were pretty cool, but I couldn't do it. The nipples are what get me. I just can't do it. And George Clooney looked just funny in the Batman suit. He has to be the last on the list. I just can't do it. So those are the two rankings I'll be doing on this episode. I'll post those on social media along with the favorite quotes. You can check those out on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Just search for Cinematic Views and you can find the page there. That'll do it for today's Batman episode. Give you kind of a preview on what the schedule is going to look like. We're going to take a quick break from Christopher Nolan's Batman. We're going to jump into two really big new releases that came out this past weekend. I'm going to do an episode on Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, and then Lilo and Stitch, the live action remake that just came out the same weekend. So those episodes will be releasing within the next week or so. And then we're going to jump back into Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy with The Dark Knight, which I'm super excited about. So, again, follow the show at youtube.com/the cinematic views. Listen to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. And then as well, follow all the social media pages. Just search for Cinematic Views on Instagram, X, and Facebook. Until then, see you all later.